Welcome back to Hot Takes and Deep Dives, and I am here with the man responsible for some of the most influential, formative pieces of art that modern day pop stars, I mean, it's clear that everything you have created is their number one influence. Whether they are aware or not, like, you are the blueprint. I am with Vincent Paterson. Your book, Icons and Instincts, I absolutely love. You are the subject of the documentary, The Man Behind the Throne. Vincent Paterson, hi.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me to chat today. And thank you for those kind words about my book. It took a while to come out. I was nervous about it, but my co-writer is the one who pushed me into doing it, and I'm really glad I did.
Good. I mean, we just got like a whole bit of a travel advice. I love. We're really we're getting a lot done. So I want to really focus the conversation around your work with Michael Jackson and Madonna, but I'm also very interested in your film and Broadway work. So I want to kind of cover all of that.
Okay.
But before we do so, I think your story is remarkable because you did not start dancing until you were what is relatively late for a dancer. The age of 24 years old, that's actually, my former partner was a professional dancer, and that's around the age that she was like, well, I need to find something that I can make a living. And that is when she actually transitioned into the next chapter of her career. So she sort of retired at 24. So, like, what got you into dance?
Into dance in general, I grew up in the 60s and Motown was popular and I loved to dance and do that, the high school dances and things, but I never had any formal training. And as you read in my book, I came from a very, very lower middle class background around oil refineries, and there were no studios that taught dance. If there were, I was certainly unaware of them. But my dad was a social dance teacher. So when I was a little kid, I picked up things really easy. So I was like 4 and 5, and there's home movies of me like doing the cha-cha in the front yard and stuff like that. But I never really thought anything about dance. It was nothing. But my home life was difficult, and I kind of escaped that by joining the theater, the drama club in junior high school. And it really gave me an opportunity to live out fantasies very different than my own. When I went to college, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. That was my first thought. And then I thought, I don't know. And there was a beautiful theater department there. And I got myself involved in the theater department and fell in love with it and changed my whole perspective and created the first interdisciplinary theater major. They never had a theater major there. But it still was not musicals. It had nothing to do with dance. And I wound up in Arizona, and the only job I could find, it was difficult then, was teaching basic social dance, ballroom dance at a Fred Astaire dance studio. And that was really bizarre, very bizarre. But I would pass this legitimate dance studio every day. And I would hear this ballet music, and I thought, I was basically a theater mole. So I thought, maybe I should take something like dance for exercise or something, So I stuck my head in, and the teacher said, hello, can I help you? And I said, yeah, I want to take some classes for exercise. And she said, well, we don't really have classes for adults, but you can take with kind of the 9 to 15-year-old girls and, see how you feel about it. And I said, okay. I had no ego about it, and I loved it, and it was fantastic. And I approached it from an actor, which I think helped me grow real quickly. I would look at images of specifically Nureyev at the time and go, okay, today when I go into class, I'm going to be this character. And that's what I would do. And so approaching it that way, only way I knew how, it seemed that dance came on to me pretty naturally. Now, I'll just quickly say I had to break my body completely apart. I was not a dancer body. I carried a bar under my arms to pull my rib cage up and back, and I carried around a big bottle of sand in a soda bottle so that when I sat down, I could work my feet. And I carried around 2 phone books so that when I could sit on them anywhere I was, I could try to open up my legs to second position and stretch. I mean, once I said yes to it, I said yes to it
But
completely.
who gave you those tricks?
Nobody. I just discovered them as I, just naturally. I knew I had to do something to pull, straighten my back up, and I
Right.
was all kind of over like this, and doing that, and I don't know. I just figured that out, and I did really well. So I loved it, and I got addicted quickly. And a series of things happened, as you know in the book. Some tragedies happened and moved me on to LA, and I just decided if I'm going to be here, I'm going to dance. And
You,
I
it's interesting. You referenced the tragedies. The tragedy you're referring to is your boyfriend was actually murdered.
Yeah.
And in addition to dealing with that crises, you encountered several things throughout your life. Like you lost a finger, and you were able to, number one, help with the solving of the murder, like actually assisting in finding the people who did it, as well as this accident with your hand, through what seems to be either metaphysics or you were incredibly spiritual. And you've been able to apply this at many different points in your life where things seem literally impossible. Like you injured your finger and you actually like grew your finger back, and you were having these psychic dreams where was your partner actually like giving you help, like in terms of actually like identifying who the murderers were, and you were helping the police department through your psychic dreams. So I just want to, we don't have to go too far into it, but I want to quickly state that you do have this sort of spiritual guides. You do have these angel guides, which I know it can sound a bit intense or woo-woo for people may be skeptical of this, but I believe this to be true.
It was funny when I've always had these little, even growing up, I would have these little kind of premonitions of things that were going to happen, and then they would happen, and I would just kind of laugh at them as a kid. And I remember being in college one time and calling my mom and saying, hey, Mom, I had this dream that you moved my brother's drum set to the other side of the room. And she said, no, how did you know that? I just did that yesterday. I said, I don't know, Mom. I just had this weird dream. I think we all have the ability to open ourselves up. So I've always opened myself up to these thoughts and not really knowing where they came from or what they were about. But things have always kind of, I hate to say revealed themselves somehow to me, but they have. And I've tried to always be open to them. With the murder situation, yes, I was having dreams where Richard was coming in and saying it was 3 people, dark-haired man, an older man, and a blonde woman, and crazy things like that. Or I don't know, with my finger, it's an amazing story. You can see that there's a little bit of difference there. What happened, it was I was working on a Nautilus machine, and someone was on the tricep machine, and I was next in line, and I put my card up onto the machine, and my finger was pulled into the chain, and I was dragged to the floor, and the whole thing was ground up to here, middle of this knuckle, middle of this bone. Mm-hmm. And they wanted to amputate it to that.
Right.
And I don't know why. I said, no, you can't. I'm going to grow it back. And the doctor looked at me like I was a raving lunatic. What do you mean you're going to grow it back? I said, look, I don't know why I'm saying it, but I'm going to grow it back, And immediately it hit me that I had already known this process in my mother's womb. So
right.
This wasn't new.
We somehow grow fingers and toes.
We do, we do. So our physical body knows how to do that. And I just somehow crazily believed that I could do it again. And I went to visit about 4 or 5 different teachers, spiritual teachers in LA, and got a bunch of information because I knew nothing about meditation or any of that stuff, self-healing. And I gave myself a program for about 3.5, 4 months and grew the finger back against the doctor. Every time I would go to visit the doctor, he would say, well, this doesn't make any sense. The bone's growing, but we should still cut it off. And I said, no. Then it got a little, well, this doesn't make any sense. The knuckle's growing, but you're never going to have a nail bed. Can I just cut it off? No. Blah, blah, blah. And I said, thank you, doctor. Bye-bye.
Right.
Appreciate it.
I could actually do a full hour with you just on this sort of psychic metaphor. I mean, we could do this entire thing and never mention Michael Jackson or Madonna. But the final thing before we get into that land is you were entertaining the thought of becoming a psychic.
I explored it in LA and I went to some classes and it was kind of crazy. I mean, we'd do these bizarre exercises like you didn't know anybody in the room. There were maybe about 10 people. You'd put something that you owned into a hat or a box or something, I can't remember, and they'd pass it around and you take out somebody's own a piece of whatever. And then you're just supposed to hold it in your hands and then talk about whatever you feel. 2 times, 2 different weeks, I picked the thing up and I knew all this information about the people that had these pieces. And, I just thought, I don't want to know everything. I don't, I don't want it to be I don't want that kind of life. I like surprises. I like dedication. I like focus. I like hope. But don't tell me if something's going to happen or not going to happen. I don't want to know. I don't want to be that kind of informed.
Okay. You land in LA. How do you go from taking this dance class, you're teaching at a dance place, you land in LA, how do you go from just hustling around LA to being cast as the gang leader in the Beat It video for Michael Jackson?
Well, a lot of hard work. I mean, it took 9 months before I got my first job here. And I kind of made a promise to myself that if I had to do something other than dance, I was going to stop dancing because I was so new to it. But it so happened again that a friend took me to have lunch at a restaurant. I hadn't eaten in 3 days, seriously. And it said waiters wanted. And I said, all right, that's it. I'm going to stop dancing. I need money. They said, come back in the evening when the manager's there. And I went to take my last dance class, I thought, and I got a phone call from a choreographer, called me out of class. Hi, I'm looking for one more guy for a TV show and your name came up. I don't know you. Can I come watch you in class? I said, are you kidding me? Please come and watch me in class. I said, I'm about to give up this profession. He came, and after about 20 minutes, his name was Joe Bennett. He gave me my first job on a TV show. And
what was the TV show?
It was CBS Evening with the Stars, I think it was called, starring Dick Van Dyke,
yes,
who was just a delightful human being. I was kind of the right look. I was, 5'11" and light hair and blue eyes and, nice looking man. And I was a good dancer. I really did. I dedicated myself. I was in classes for 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week here. I really wanted this to happen. And then it just kind of started snowballing. And interestingly enough, the choreographer who had given my name to that choreographer, I started to work for. His name was Lester Wilson, an incredible African-American choreographer who moved out from New York and really changed the face of dance out here. He started doing dance that was sexier, more sensual and beautiful, and I loved it. Michael Peters happened to also be his lead dancer. So Michael and I started working together as dancers for Lester Wilson. Then Michael started teaching a class and I started taking the class. I wound up being his principal student or whatever you want to say in the classes, and we became dear friends. And he started to get some work. And one of the first gigs he had out here was in the electronic media was Beat It. And he said, listen, he called me Lenny. That my middle name's Leonard, so he called me Lenny. He was the only one I let call him that because I hated that name. But he said, you're going to have to audition, Lenny, but I can't pick it. Michael Jackson wants to pick all the main guys. I said, okay. So I went in dressed as a gang.
But at this point, he wasn't Michael Jackson yet. He was Michael Jackson, but he was a child star. He hadn't yet put out.
Well, Billie Jean had just come out. So he had
one.
He had taken his first foray into the MTV video world with Billie Jean and became very popular very quickly, and the first Black artist on MTV. So I wasn't really a Jackson fan. There were some songs that I liked. Shake Your Body Down to the Ground was one of my faves. But, Michael was a kid and I wasn't really interested in him. But
You didn't like ABC? That's my
I
favorite.
did.
That's my favorite
No, I
Jackson
did.
5 song.
I did a lot. But that's what I'm saying. There's a handful of songs that I
Yeah.
really, really liked. And so I auditioned, and having been an actor, I knew that they were looking for gangs. And so I went in as a character, which I was very comfortable doing. And all the other guys came in jazz pants and sleeveless t-shirts and leg warmers and the whole thing. And I came in looking kind of like I do in the short film. And I could see Michael Jackson standing up there saying to Michael Peters, "Who's that guy? Who's that guy?" And I did stand out. So because of my look, first of all, and I had grown a beard a little bit, just a dirty face, and wore an earring, and and I could dance really well. So he picked me. He picked me to be the gang leader. And Michael
But they were
Jackson.
also like when you watch the video, those are the real gangs of LA, like in like some of the people.
Some, not many, more like consider them extras. So there was a team of about 18 male dancers who kind of formed the nucleus around Michael Peters, who's in white, and myself, who's in black. And those were dancers. And then and when you see the large scenes, like the knife fight scene and stuff like that, that's filled with gangs, two rival gangs, actually, the Crips and the Bloods. So,
Why was that necessary to have real gang?
I'm not really sure because I wasn't involved because I was dancing in it, and I wound up becoming Michael Peters' assistant choreographer in it.
Yeah.
But that was after everything was already formulated and the whole.
I thought it was
created.
funny in the book how you wrote that the Crips and the Bloods, like they didn't understand that you have to reshoot things like 10 times from all the. They're like, oh, I thought we were just going to pull knives on each other and be out of here in 10 minutes.
Exactly. We thought we'd show up for 5 minutes,
like
do
this is
one little
Hollywood,
take,
baby,
and then have a dinner, and then boom, and get some money and go home. It was a rude awakening for them, but there was never any problems. Everybody was very sweet on the set.
That is so funny.
It went very smoothly, very smoothly. And that's kind of how I met Michael.
And then
Jackson.
the next step with Michael was Thriller.
I was his assistant on Thriller as well, and I was a dancing zombie. That opportunity gave me the chance to get even closer to Michael Jackson.
Yes,
because as an assistant choreographer, at least the way it used to be, the choreographer teaches the movement first, and then the assistant winds up stepping in and overseeing everything to be sure the movement is exactly what the choreographer wanted, that all the lines are specific and clean, and that was very important to Michael Peters. So in that way, I dealt on a more personal basis with Michael Jackson, working with him just by himself and like that. And also, I'm kind of a gregarious kind of man, and I knew how sweet Michael Jackson was from having worked with him on Beat It and now on this. So when we were shooting, actually, we only shot one evening, but he would be like nervously hiding in his trailer, and I would go in and say, "Mike, come on out. The dancers are hanging out outside." "Oh, I don't know, Vince. I'm kind of shy." And I'm like, "No, Mike, come on. These are dancers. They're the nicest people in the world, and they love you for what you're doing, not for being Michael Jackson. So come on out and just hang out with us." And he did. And that was delightful. And I think that also began to establish a relationship with him where he understood that I didn't want anything from him. I just wanted him to enjoy himself, basically. That's all. I wanted him to really have the complete experience of dancing with a bunch of dancers. He had never done that before outside of his family.
The makeup, like the zombie makeup. So you're in the video for Thriller. How long was the whole makeup process?
Well, we were very fortunate. Actors, dancers rarely get that kind of attention.
Yeah.
So we had face masks made prior, and then there were pieces that they would put on us that were, whether it was our face or our forehead and cheeks or whatever, and we all got fake teeth that they put in, zombie teeth, and I kept mine, which I wasn't supposed to, but I did. So it took probably each person probably about 3 hours at least for the makeup, you know.
So you've done these two projects for Michael Jackson, and then he calls you personally that he wants you to conceive, choreograph, and direct Smooth Criminal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, did you, I mean, you basically described in the book that you felt, I mean, in a way you were put into a bit of an awkward position because you've been so loyal to Michael Peters, and it could be perceived that you are taking this from him. How did you get over that to actually accept it?
Well, my relationship with Michael Peters basically fell apart for a long time because Michael had a very big ego.
Michael Peters.
Michael Peters.
Yeah.
And he accused me of trying to take his jobs away. And I was just heartbroken. And he just kind of pushed me out of his life at that point. And I thought, okay, friendship is very, very important, but I did nothing wrong here. I did absolutely nothing wrong here. And if this is what my path is, I have to follow it, you know, and hopefully Michael Peters will kind of come to his senses, if I can say that kindly, and realize this had nothing to do with him. And I never would have done anything behind his back. It was difficult.
Did you eventually reunite with him?
I did. You know, Michael wound up, sadly, he had AIDS, and I became one of the group of people who helped him, taking him to doctors, taking him to get his medication, things like that. And sad but beautiful ending of the story is that I was the last person besides his mother and manager, who was his best friend, to speak with him. I was called into the room, and I was the last person to talk to him before he passed away.
What year did he pass away?
God knows. I don't even know what year 2 years ago happened. I'm not good with that.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's a remarkable ending.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing was, he told me then, as he was dying, that Michael Jackson had called him that day, which is so beautiful, and told him that he really appreciated everything that Michael Peters had done for him. And that just broke my heart.
So let's go back to the phone call, the Smooth Criminal. Was the song already done?
Yes. Well, he was working at a studio, almost so I can see it from my house, down the street in Hollywood, and asked me to come by. You know what?
Actually, this is actually my question. Was the album, because the way things worked in the 90s was, you know, I'm talking about like when music videos were really popular, the MTV era. The record would already be locked. Maybe they'd be like fine tuning something, but the singles pretty much were all chosen in advance. A lot of videos were already in the can by the time the record came out, and they were ready to go. My question is, like, were the songs finished? Like, was the album out?
No, it was about 1987 actually.
Okay.
And I think Beat It was 82, Thriller was 83 or 84 or something like that. Then he did Bad after that, which was in New York. Anyway, no, the song was not done. The album was not completed. And so he called me to this recording studio, and played a little bit of the track for me. All he had on there was two things: Annie, are you okay? Annie, are you okay? Are you okay, Annie? And you've been hit by a smooth criminal. That was it. The rest was just music I was listening to, you know. And he said, "What do you think of it?" And I said, "It's great, man. It's really a great song." And I said, "What do you want? Why did you call me to listen to it? You know, I'm flattered, but why'd you call me?" "Well, I want you to come up with an idea for the short film." He always called them short films. "I want you to come up with an idea for the short film. I want you to choreograph it, and I want you to direct it." I was kind of just flabbergasted. I hadn't really done very many things. After Beat It, I did a few videos from like some rock and rollers who thought I looked in my real life like I looked in Beat It, like Van Halen and David Lee Roth, and you know, people like that. When they saw me for real, they kind of were like, "Oh, you're a little different than what we thought." I said, "That's okay. I can still do the same thing." So we had a great time. But I hadn't done very much of anything. So I was really a novice. And Jackson never said, "Can I see a reel?" Have you ever done anything? Nothing, nothing. He just trusted me. And I have to say, it has to be in the same way that we began our conversation here. There must have been something that told him inside that I was the right person for this, because I had no credits and nothing to show. So I did. I went home and he said, I want you to listen to this song, let the music tell you what it wants to be, which became kind of my motto for everything after that choreographically. And I did. I listened, and I came up with this theme that I knew he loved old films. I knew he loved Fred Astaire. I knew all that stuff. And so I came up with Smooth Criminal. And going back to the idea about album being done, he gave me carte blanche to cast it, to put the entire thing together. Gave me a studio where we were going to shoot it. I put everything in the studio. I rehearsed on this side. On the other side was the set. I would rehearse with people, take them over to the set, put them in the set, rehearse on the set, shoot what I was doing. He gave me an Ikegami camera to shoot, video camera. I would go over to his house a couple nights a week and say, okay, this is what we're doing, because he was still working on the album. So he would say, I love it. I think you need more dancers, don't you? So I said, yeah, get 10 more dancers. So I did. That went on till I think we got 70. I started with 10. I think we wound up with close to 70 altogether. But, and he would also say, I love this. I think you need more music, don't you? And I was like, sure, Michael, I'll take more music. So this 3.5-minute piece turned into 9.5 minutes, And yeah, that's kind of how it came about. I didn't get to direct it, unfortunately, because it originally was just supposed to be a short film on its own. It became part of Moonwalker, and Colin Chilvers was directing Moonwalker. So he became the director of pretty much each of the pieces that happened inside. But I will say, and I think he recently passed away, he was a wonderful man, and he knew the situation with Michael and me. He knew that I had this footage, film footage, and he looked at everything I had shot, because I shot it as storyboards. And basically that's what he followed to make the film. So I was very, very happy with the collaboration.
You created the move where he's basically leaning. I think you were like, you were inspired by like skis, like how skiers, they're kind of like bobbing and weaving. Can you talk about that?
Yeah.
The ski metaphor.
The lean.
Yeah.
The lean. Yeah. I knew Michael liked crazy shit, so I wanted to give him some fun stuff that was like outrageous that nobody had seen. So I did the thing with the coin flip at the very beginning when he walks in to start the music. It goes across CGI and lands in the jukebox, That was the first thing. He was like, yeah, I love that. And then Jeffrey Daniel, who also worked on it with me, did a couple small parts. He was a street dancer who had sung with the group Shalimar, and Michael had befriended him because Michael used to work out with street kids on Sundays and to learn what the street kids were doing, which was great. And Jeffrey came up with the idea of the balls being squeezed and, the pool ball, Michael catching it and, breaking apart in his hand. Michael came up with the crazy idea of him shooting that gangster up on the top row up there, and him going back as a cartoon and fading into the wall. That was Michael's idea, because he saw where we were going and he was like, I have a good idea. Well, the lean was something that many years before I had seen a dance concert with a company called Momix, and they had some dancers on stage that were actually in snow skis. So they had the ability to move around and do all of these things. So the funny thing is, the way we did it was basically OG theater techniques. I mean, there was no magic to it. Each male dancer had on a suit, and they had a harness on underneath. And the harness had two little wires that came out from each side, went up to the ceiling, went all the way across the stage, and came down. 2 men for each dancer. Each one had a wire. So on my counts, what they would do is when they would release the tension, the dancer could go over. When they would pull the wire, the dancer was pulled back. That's how it worked. And then at the very last piece, they do a move where they go to the side and we cut and take the wires out, and then they continue to join the dance. And then, of course, in CGI, we paint all the wires out. But that funny little move became so famous and has become so famous that, I mean, you see things on Facebook and Instagram where scientists, it's probably bull, but scientists are trying to imagine how can a human body do that and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, oh, and there were shoes in the floor. And well, eventually there were shoes in the floor when we did it on tour. But originally it was not done that way. It was really old school theater tricks. So that's how it came about.
Something that you talk about in the book is how with both Michael Jackson and Madonna, it seems like part of the reason they felt they trusted you and they believed in you is because you had an ability to embody and like mimic their bodies, and the movements seemed more accessible in a way because you basically did the entire thing and like somehow morphed your body to mimic theirs. Can you describe like the difference between like Michael Jackson's body and like how you would do that for him and then Madonna? Can you explain that?
Yeah, you know, I guess it's kind of, again, what we were talking about at the beginning. You know, you kind of get this feeling like if somebody says to me, get up and dance like Michael Jackson, I can't do it. You know, it doesn't work. But when I'm listening to his music and I'm putting something together for him, I was able to understand basically what his strong points were and what his limitations were. So I wouldn't give him something where he had to do a grand jeté and leap across the stage. It would have been stupid and ridiculous. But I could take what he did, how he worked in a very tight, he worked a lot tighter in a much tighter fashion, very clean and tight and precise. That's how Michael moved, whether it was street work or whether it was jazz, we called it at that point. He could pick all that stuff up. And he really dealt with rhythms. He was about rhythm, you know. So everything I did in working with him was rhythm. And, you know, we would play together as I would create stuff and he would go, oh, you know what? I feel it on this rhythm instead. Mm-hmm. And then we would change it to that rhythm. That's how we would collaborate. As far as choreographically in Smooth Criminal anyway, the way we would work is everything that he did with anybody else in the room was mine. Then I would give him moments for himself, like going up onto the little bandstand with the band behind him, and he did his own thing, however he wanted to move, whatever it was about. So that's how we worked collaboratively in choreography. I did everything that was involved anybody else. Now, Madonna, you know, when Madonna, I first started working with her, she wanted me to do it, but she was resistant. And I just basically told her, though, I did the commercial Pepsi with her, and then I got it. Then she asked me to do Express Yourself with her, and I was doing a very sexy scene in the boudoir. We had rehearsed it, and when we went to shoot it, she started doing her own stuff. And I said, Madonna, you know, can you? We work this out. Why don't you do what I'm telling you to do? I'm just being honest with you. I think that what we worked on is much better than what you're doing right now. And I said, and if you don't need me, I can go. But, you know, she goes, no, I'll do what you want. I'll do it. And she did it and everybody loved it. And then, of course, at the end of another piece is when she's at the top of the staircase there. And I gave her movement to do. And, you know, she said, well, Vince, what do I do with my hands here? And I said, well, just grab your crotch because you got bigger balls than anybody in the room. So, but Madonna was a trained dancer. Madonna, you know, Michael, I think, was only trained in maybe tap, which I don't do. But Madonna was trained. She went to Graham. She had a lot of knowledge. But when I first started working with her, especially on the Blond Ambition Tour, I said, you know, you're known for a dancer. You call yourself a dancer, but I've never really seen you dance. So I'm really going to push you on this, you know. And she was great. Let's do it. Push me. So she had a different kind of knowledge of dance. So I was able to do things with her that I might not have done with Michael, whether it was lifts or extensions or, you know, moving her body in a different way that was bigger than Michael Jackson. So that was the difference, you know. And I'll just point out a third person, BJORK. When I worked with BJORK on Dancer in the Dark, you know, I mean, in my head, I saw her as this gorgeous Icelandic Teletubby, you know, where her movements were rigid and very pedestrian, but very syncopated in a way. And so she was very nervous at first. And I said, don't worry about what I've done with anybody else. I'm going to become you and create movement that works for you, not for me, for you. And so, yeah, you kind of put yourself in the mindset and the physical body set of these people. And though you may not be able to emulate or imitate them specifically, at least I have a good sense of the difference between a very percussive tight Bjork body to a different kind of percussive body with Michael Jackson to a much more liquid, flowing, sensual body with Madonna, So.
And how were you introduced? So, well, let's just finish up Michael Jackson, actually. You went on to work with him for 17 years, on and off. How do you reflect on him now? Just kind of like the aftermath of his death, and also when he was coming deep under scrutiny during like the allegations and the scandal, which continues somewhat to like loom over his legacy. How did that land on you?
Well, I have to just preface this by saying I'm going to try to get through this conversation about him without tears rolling down my face, because every time I do, I get very emotional. He was so responsible for so much of my career and for opening the doors to so many people, including Madonna, those kind of allegations and stuff. Look, it's hard enough to be a superstar, and especially one who travels in the realms that he did and Madonna does and did at that time, especially. And so they're always under scrutiny, and I saw him in different situations be crushed, whether it was no matter what it was, even going to black or white for a moment, and the end section with the Panther where he grabbed his crotch a lot and did crazy things, and so many of his fans dissed him and really spoke badly about him. And he would cry to me, physically cry, and just say, Vince, I don't know why these people are saying these mean things about me. I love my fans. I do everything for my fans. So I had seen him through stuff. I never spoke to him ever about the allegations, because just between you and me, or anybody who's listening, I don't believe them. I mean, I knew a man who was, yes, he was quite immature on one hand because he lived a very cloistered life with his family, and he didn't really have outside friends. He never really grew up that way, like the way we all grew up, with friends or family that we could really talk to about anything from sex to politics to football. I mean, it's crazy. He never had that. And so I know he was always a child at heart, and in a way, this dichotomy, this crazy, one hand being this genius, and on the other hand, this being this immature 12-year-old, And I just know how much he loved people, and I know how much he loved children, especially because they didn't know him. They didn't know who he was. They didn't care about him.
They didn't want
famous.
anything from him.
No, and they didn't care about him being famous. He was just fun, whether it was throwing water balloons, having a water balloon fight, or a pie throwing fight, or just being crazy, I mean, the way I work is I don't try to impose my friendship on somebody outside of the working arena. Especially superstars, because I don't want them to think that I want something else from them other than what we're creating at the moment. So I never tried to become a friend of Michael's outside of work. I never went to Neverland. I did go to Havenhurst when he lived at Havenhurst, because I had to for different projects.
He never invited you to Neverland? Or you never went?
The subject never came up. I mean, I'm sure if I had said I want to come to Neverland, he would have said, oh, come on. We'll go on all the rides together. I know that's what would have happened. But it was me. I put a stopper to things so that people don't think I want something else other than have this incredible creative collaboration. Part of it is my own insecurity. So the thing that upset me toward the end is that so many people, especially after he passed, so many celebrities called themselves his friend. And that pissed me off because I figured, how do you define this word friend? If Michael was your friend, he wasn't my friend. But if Michael was your friend and you saw things happening, especially with drug use, or why didn't you step in to help him? Why didn't you say, I'm your friend and I'm here and I want to talk to you. I want to sit down with you and see if you're okay. You know, people can easily come out of the woodwork and call themselves a friend once somebody's passed on.
The last thing I want to talk about with regard to Michael
Yeah.
is you created his Super Bowl performance, which this was the very first halftime event, the thing that made it a spectacle.
Yeah.
Now, who tasked you with that? Like, did he say, okay, if I'm going to accept this, this has to be something the world has never seen before?
Well, actually, it was the director, Don Mischer, who recently passed, an incredible television director. And I guess he knew that I had done this work with Michael Jackson and contacted me and said, I'm doing the Super Bowl. Michael has agreed to do it. Would you put it together? And so I sat with him for a couple of meetings and came up with all these ideas and all these thoughts. And then I threw them at Michael, who was on tour, I think, at the time. And we came up with all of those crazy things. I came up with all those impersonators at the beginning, appearing in front of Supertrons all around. And then finally him being ejected from underneath the stage and, you know, doing that fantastic show and having all of the audience in the Super Bowl have those cards to do this incredible, fun imagery of young cartoon kids around the world holding hands. And, you know, it was a remarkable experience. It was Don Mischer, though, really, who had the idea to bring Michael into this project and me into the project. And collectively, it was really the three of us that changed this, you know, changed the face of Super Bowl halftime. Absolutely. And everybody has their own version. But the beautiful thing is that really Don and Michael and I are the ones that kind of laid down the scene and paved the way and said, okay, you know what? We're changing the game here, and come and join us. And I'm happy to see that we did create a pattern that has still going on to this day. So it was a beautiful thing.
Take me into the room when Madonna says to you, I don't need a fucking choreographer.
Well, I had just done The Way You Make Me Feel with Joe Pytka, an amazing commercial director. And so he was doing this project with Madonna, Pepsi commercial, and he called me up and he said, hey, Vince, can you get your ass down here, man? I got Madonna. She doesn't want to sing. She doesn't want to dance. I don't know what the hell to do with her. So I said, okay, Joe, sure, anything for you. So I came down to the set. I'm standing with him, and he's telling me about the commercial, what it's going to be. And Madonna goes walking by with her entourage, and Joe says, Madonna, I would like to introduce you to Vincent Paterson. He's Michael Jackson's choreographer. Madonna didn't even look at me, just walked right past and said, I don't need a fucking choreographer, and walked on. And I said, well, Joe, I think I better go now. And he goes, no, stay. So I did. I stayed, and I rescued a couple situations where she was really kind of losing it, and helped coordinate camera movement with her movement, and it all fell together. And then I was putting together some little background stuff for dancing extras that were there. And Madonna showed up behind me. All the dancers stopped, and I said, what's going on? What are you stopping for? And somebody pointed behind me. I turned around, there was Madonna, and she was like, I think she had curlers and bunny slippers on or something. But she said, what are you doing? And I said, nothing for you. I'm not doing anything for you. This is for the background, you know. And she said, no, I like it. Show me what you're doing. So she came back, and I showed her, and the commercial went really well. And we had a great time.
Of course it gets banned.
Of course. Well, that's how wonderful, you know. I mean, it got more publicity by being banned than it did probably if it hadn't been banned. So we did that. And then from that is when she asked me to do Express Yourself. And I did the second piece with her. So, yeah.
Now, Express Yourself, that is entirely you, correct? All of the movement, that is your vision with David Fincher?
Yeah. What a choreographer does that many people don't realize is we do so much more than just creating steps. I mean, in that, you know, simple things like showing her how to elegantly sit on a divan and smoke a cigarette with a cigarette holder, or crawl across the floor sensually to the cat milk and pour it all over her face, or work with the guys under the set, doing the push-ups and all
yeah.
the calisthenic stuff, and also to be there before there were, I think they're called intimacy
coordinators, yes.
Coordinators. Long before that happened, she had to do a scene where she's supposed to be naked in a room and Slam comes in and all of that. And so I was the person on set to design it so that she was comfortable, that her breasts weren't exposed and, stuff like that. So yeah, you did everything. And then plus like the piece I told you about, she's at the top of the stairs and she does the thing in the man's suit, So yeah, I was there for the whole thing and it was delightful, both working for Fincher, that I did several other projects with him later. And then this kind of made Madonna's and my creative relationship, I think, a little stronger by that.
What's interesting about, well, first of all, how you and I connected was you had seen a clip on Instagram of me interviewing 3 of the Blond Ambition Tour boys recently, within the past few weeks, and you messaged me saying that we should do something, which was, I was so surprised to see that message, and that's how you and I connected. And what's
interject because I loved what you did with them. That's why.
Oh, thank you.
You did beautiful. It was fun to watch. It was beautiful. It was creative. It was interesting. It was innovative. Your questions were intelligent. That's why I wrote you, Jess.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we're doing this. This is fascinating to me. What's interesting about the Blond Ambition Tour, I did not know this until I read your book, that she actually had hired a different choreographer, a woman choreographer, and it was sort of a mess. And she spent a lot of money, wasted a lot of time, a lot of money. And then did she reach out to you to sort of come in and save it?
Yeah, I don't know how much pre-production time Madonna had done with Carol Armitage, and she's an incredible choreographer, what she does. It's just incredible. But I guess they had worked together. Carol was with Madonna to cast the show. I had nothing to do with that. I don't know what else Carol did before I arrived, but I guess things weren't working. I got a call from Madonna here at the house and saying, Vince, it's not working. It's not working with Carol. I've got a deadline. I've got tour lined up here. I have got to get something done. And, the dancers respect you. You know how to deal with me. You know how to deal with them. Could you come in and do this? And there was a bit of negotiating that went down, and it wasn't the easiest in the world. And I was happy that I had agents to stand in for me.
Negotiating like money?
Yeah.
Okay.
Money. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, that's natural.
Yeah. But it was a little tough.
Okay.
to the point where the day I was supposed to go to rehearsal, she still had not said she would agree to the contract. And then at the very last minute, she conceded. But and it all worked out great in the end. But yes, I did. I did know how to work with her. I had already worked with other celebrities at that point, a lot more than I had when I first started working with Michael. And I knew her from 2 projects already, and I knew how she worked. And I knew what a tough cookie she was. But again, she was kind of a little desperate and needed me, and I was there for her. And ever so grateful. But I told her in the first conversation on the phone, I said, listen, I don't want to just choreograph this. I want to co-direct this with you because I just did Michael's tour and they kind of ripped me off of my credit. And I've done a couple other tours. And, I want to co-direct this with you because that's what I do. Now, to be fair to Madonna, because I came in so late, sets were already designed, costumes were already being worked on, but I did have the opportunity to change the order of the song list, throw some stuff out, put other things in. Vogue, for instance, was hidden in the middle of the show, and I knew it was going to be amazing. They had just shot it, and I had seen some footage, and I flipped out. I put it at the end of the show as the last song of the show itself before the encores. Threw out one of the encores and brought in Holiday instead. And so we worked really beautifully together. We had a very short period of time. I had basically 18 days to create 21 pieces before we went into tech rehearsal at the Disney lot for, I think, about a week and a half, or maybe even 2 weeks we had. It was insane. And it was brilliant. And it was something that I think all of us will never, ever forget.
Some of the imagery that you write in your book, or it's language that you use, the way you describe it, is how you put it on yourself and then you put it on the dancers, like the moves, and then you put it on, let's say, Michael Jackson or Madonna. I love how you use the words "put it." Like, I can really visualize that. So like, how much, so in this case, are you also putting it on Nikki and Donna?
Well, the way I would work, I mean, it was insane that to say even yes to doing this, to try to do 21 pieces in 18 days. I mean, you have to be out of your fucking mind, excuse my language. But so I would record the song maybe about 20 or 30 times on a little cassette, and I would put headsets on like this with my tape deck at the top of my bed, long cord, and I would go to sleep, and I would just fall asleep with the music playing. And I would wake up, and the whole thing was basically in front of my eyes. I know it's weird, but it also goes back to our first conversation.
You're a very strong visualizer.
Yeah. And I would go to the studio, which is right down the street from me. And I had two assistants, Kevin Stay. So I got them in there first, and I would say, okay, I'm going to throw this stuff out at you. Pick it up as fast as you can. I don't know what it is, but here it comes. And I would just go through the dance. Boom, boom, boom. This is it. Try to learn it. Try to learn it. This is what's going to happen. Then when I saw it on them, I could refine things a little bit. Then the dancers, all the men with Nikki and Donna together would all come in together, and I would put it on them. This would all happen usually before 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so that the piece was kind of set. And then Madonna would come in after working out, after working with her band. She would come in for rehearsals and work like a maniac. I'd put her in the middle, show her what was going on, and then we would start that piece. And by the end of the day, we would pretty much have that piece done. The next morning, I would come in, do the same exact thing. Smith and Kevin would learn everything. Dancers would come in, Madonna would come in. The first thing that we did is review what we did the day before and start the new piece the second day. It was insane. But the beautiful thing was we became a family really quickly because we had no option, you know. I mean, it was panic mode, but without feeling the panic. We just, all of us, everybody involved in that tour. I'm talking the lighting designers and Marlene Stewart, who did the auxiliary costumes, and Gautier, and everybody, the dancers, we all just said, we're committed and we're just going to do it. We don't care how insane this schedule is. This is going to happen. So much hard work and so much sweat and so much laughter. You know, a lot of it was collaborative. Hip hop was new. Oliver Crooms, who came in, was a hip hop dancer. So there's a little couple sections where I let him create those moments because he knew what he was doing and I didn't. But once they were created, then I fixed them, you know, made them work. It was the same thing like Vogue. I would never, ever take responsibility for choreographing Vogue, the original piece, the original video. That was really Louis and Jose. Mm-hmm. But what I did do the first day that I came in, because they were going to start shooting the next day, I would look at what they did, and then I would kind of fix it a little bit to make it more into a clearer dance and to make sure that everybody, like I said earlier about Michael Peters, be sure that all the lines were right, be sure that it looked beautiful and perfect and everybody was in sync. So when I later did different versions of Vogue, it was the same thing. I would take the crux of what had already been created, but reimagine it for whether it was on stage for the Blond Ambition Tour as a fashion show, and that went into something else, or whether it was my crazy version of Marie Antoinette for the MTV Awards, you know, taking the basic Vogue movements that they had already created and then filling in a world around it. I
think another thing that I did not know before I read your book was you create the version, the Marie Antoinette MTV Awards. I don't think people know that they had to do that the very next night for a benefit. The same performance.
Yeah. No, we did it the night before.
Oh, it was the night before.
No, I'm sorry. No, the next night. You're exactly right.
It was back to back. So did anything change between those two performances of it, or was it the exact same performance?
It was the exact same performance. The only change was that Madonna and the dancers were like absolutely ecstatic about doing it a second time because this was before social media, you know. And after it blew up, and even what happened after the rehearsal, people were talking about this.
Mm.
And I was directing a big benefit for AIDS that Bernie Taupin was producing, and along with another friend of mine, Harold Hudis. And I just said to Madonna that afternoon, right after rehearsal for the MTV Awards, I said, why don't we do this tomorrow night? I'm doing this project for AIDS, APLA, AIDS Project Los Angeles. Why don't I open the show with this? And Madonna was like, great, let's do it. And so that's what happened. We just brought a couple of those columns. And I mean, the set was a little minor than what we had on MTV, but we just had the columns and the shades to carry her out. And the fans, of course.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say was, of course, when people think of that Marie Antoinette MTV performance, the first thing that comes to mind outside of the costume are, of course, the fans, which that was you have had those, the fans.
Yeah. I was doing a project for Diana Ross that never materialized, but I was doing a Love Hangover. And at that time, when that song came out, there were a lot of, in the gay clubs especially, there were a lot of guys that had these big fans and doing all these disco fans, you know. So I was going to use that in this project with Diana. And I don't know why, I just yanked them out of my closet. I had them stuck in the back and I took them down to rehearsal, and Madonna had called me. I need to do this, blah, blah, blah. What do you think? I want to do a piece with Nikki and Donna and I in suits and the guys in skirts. And I said, we just did that. You know, I said, we just did the suit thing. Let's try something else. What? And I said, I have no idea. Let me go down to a studio and play and see what happens. And I took the fans down there and I started playing around, and I thought, you know what's weird? Voguing reminds me in some abstract way of kind of the foppish movement in the courts, in the Marie Antoinette courts, that, you know, and the posing and all of that. And I started to run with that idea, and that's how the whole thing materialized. And I had these fans and I started playing with the fans, and, you know, and the girls, the women, I can't say girls anymore. The women were very freaked when I said, okay, you're going to flip the fan and catch it, right? And if you ever look at it again, you can see their face, especially in their eyes, when they flip it and they do catch it. Their eyes all light up because it was live. I mean, they had no option, you know. The guys were standing by if they had to run and pick it up and hand it to one of the women again. But, you know, I absolutely loved working with Madonna. You know, she's hard edge sometimes, but I don't know, you know, just so inspiring to me, and so brave and so gorgeous and beautiful, and at that time especially hungry, you know, hungry. And you can't ask for more as a director choreographer than to have somebody who really wants new information, you know. And
yeah, actually my favorite number in the Blond Ambition Tour is Keep It Together. And I want to ask you, to what degree was Fosse a huge inspiration for you?
I had never seen a Fosse piece when I created that. You know, I had never seen. I wasn't a real musical person. You know, I mean, like, I didn't like Broadway musicals. I didn't like musical films. I don't know. It just wasn't me. I don't know. It wasn't something that I was. No, I mean, I knew who Fosse was, and I had auditioned for Fosse once, but it didn't work out. But I mean, I knew his photos of his style, but, you know, there was no social media at that time. So it wasn't like you saw things unless you went to New York and you saw a show, you know. So I was familiar a little bit with the idea of Fosse, but I was going after Clockwork Orange. That was my inspiration for the piece, you know, was this crazy, wacky family that were violent and loving and everything in between, you know, from one extreme to the other. And that was my inspiration, was Clockwork Orange. It had nothing to do with Fosse, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is shocking to me. Wow.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I have to ask, with Madonna and Michael Jackson, they were like the two most famous people on the planet.
Yeah.
Did they ever like talk about each other or like ask questions or?
A little bit, but not too much. You know, they knew I was working with the, every time I wasn't working with one, I was working with the other, it
Yeah.
seemed, for a while there. No, Michael was a lot more curious about Madonna than Madonna was curious about Michael, you know. But I did know that one time I went over to Madonna's for something and Michael was sitting in a car, in the backseat of a car with the driver. And I think he was waiting there for Madonna to maybe talk about collaborating something. I'm not exactly sure what it was about. There was a small curiosity, but no. And then when I did the Academy Awards for Madonna, they wound up going together.
Yes.
So, yeah, that was
Yeah,
cool.
you choreographed her doing Sooner or Later.
Sooner or later, yeah, for the Academy Awards,
Yeah.
yeah. That was cool.
As far as giving her notes, I mean, she's notoriously today surrounded by yes men, and it seems like you were very honest with her. What were, like, you really told her the truth, like how you described, like talking her out of doing, repeating the express yourself stuff. Were there any other notes that you gave her where you were like, actually, this is a better idea? Like, where she like had an idea for something and you thought maybe we could do it a different way?
When we were creating the Blond Ambition Tour?
Yeah, or anything you did with her.
I mean, the Like a Virgin thing, I mean, that's a perfect example, you know. She came in, she played the music for me. It was kind of like Patti Smith. It was rock and roll, dark rock and roll, and she was going to play the guitar, which she later did in another tour,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
you know. And I had just befriended a woman named Ofra Haza, who was from Yemen. You know, it was middle, an Egyptian kind of feel to it. It was fabulous, but it was a dance tune. So I said, listen, I want you to hear this piece of music. And I gave her the song to take home. I said, I have this idea in my head, a whole different way of doing this. And I had envisioned this bed and her on the bed and these guys. Originally, I had them as bed posts with tree limbs coming out of their arms, because I thought that would be interesting with voguing, to have these extended arms that were tree limbs, like they were bed posts. And then the next day she came in and she said, look what I brought, or look what I got. And she opened up her bag and it was these cone bras that Gautier had made for her, and she had never used. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, this is perfect. Yeah. So forget those tree limbs. We're going to use those bras. And then I told her about the bed and the whole thing. And she was like, yes, we're going to do it. So, but that's how we would inspire each other. I would throw something, she would throw something. I would throw something, she would throw something, you know. I mean, she didn't want to be lifted at first. And I said, she goes, I don't want to be lifted like some girl. And I said, no, like a queen. And she would go, okay, great, lift me, you know. So, and listen, as a choreographer, when I was choreographing, I did every step myself. I put it on my body first, always, you know. And truth be told, and, you know, I'm maybe jumping the gun on this, but some friends and I are putting a pitch reel together to see if she will allow us to do a documentary about the Blond Ambition Tour alone. Because I have 45 minutes of footage in the rehearsal studio that nobody has ever seen. It's raw.
Interesting.
It's just me with a video camera shooting 45 to 50 minutes of what we did. She looks absolutely breathtakingly gorgeous. She's like, what, 29 years old or something? I mean, we're all in our prime at that time. And, you know, no makeup, you know, muscles, gorgeous muscles, looking like a thoroughbred racehorse, you know, and absolutely exquisite and beautiful and there and involved. And so these friends of mine said, we want to do something with this. So we're playing around and we're trying to do a pitch reel to see if she'll allow us to do this. We'd love to do it.
I love that.
Yeah, we'll see.
Now, it's interesting that you just brought that up about documentary, because of course they're filming Truth or Dare while you're on tour. Now, you're obviously not in Truth or Dare. Why did you not want to participate?
Well, first of all, the choreographer director doesn't travel with the tour. You put it together and you send it on its way. So I wasn't part of that experience, you know, and it wasn't shot during rehearsals. You know, it was only shot after the tour was on its path. I'm in the very first shot, actually, in Japan. But, again, and I don't want to say this negatively because I don't really have negative things to say about Madonna, but Madonna can manipulate situations to work out for herself. And it was kind of still early on in my career, kind of, and I didn't want to give anybody the opportunity to manipulate me in a way that I'd be not looked at in as the person I am, or the creator that I am. Mm-hmm. And that would have been in somebody else's hands. So for those two reasons, but predominantly because I wasn't on the tour. I didn't go on the tour, I put it on its way. I appeared in Stockholm to pull it all back together before it was shot in Paris and before they headed on to do the HBO special in south of France.
Yeah. What I want to ask, I have one more thing. Oh my God, of course. I mean, this is like the most, no, because this is my brain just go. Okay. You vividly described the Like a Virgin piece in Blonde Ambition. Of course, the iconic red bed, which would reappear all these years later on the Celebration tour, which in a lot of ways is her homage to all of your work with her. Now, I know you went to see the Celebration tour in LA?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Were you just like blown away that like how many pieces it really is an homage to you.
I think it was an homage to us, Yeah, I was blown away. My husband and I were freaking out. And there were so many things, not only of Madonna and the Blond Ambition tour, but it was introduced by Bob the drag queen in the Marie Antoinette outfit. I mean, starting with that. And then later, when they did this kind of homage to Michael Jackson, they used my Michael Jackson Grammys, the way I opened up the Grammys with Michael in a shadow behind the screen. So I kind of felt like this is weird, this is weird and beautiful. And it was, it really made me feel really good that she felt that what we had created so many years ago was still so relevant to her career today. That was such a beautiful compliment. And even though I never got to talk to her about it, I was really, really appreciative and humbled. Yeah.
On Madonna, you write in the book, of all the stars you've worked with, she really knows how to live. And I think that's really in stark contrast to what you described about Michael Jackson, who was so sheltered, never really had a full life. And when you look at Madonna, she has children. She's going to the Comedy Cellar here in New York. Like she's out there in the world, even though she's Madonna. So like, what did you mean by it that's my interpretation of it. What did you mean by it?
That is what I meant. That, it's very difficult for a celebrity of that caliber to be able to put themselves out and step in the middle of the public, And she did, if she wanted to go dancing, clubbing, she took her friends and went clubbing, still, I think.
One final thing about Madonna is you also choreographed her in EVITA.
Yeah.
And my question about, I love EVITA. I love what you did with EVITA, and I love the film, and Alan Parker, I think, did an amazing job. She did an amazing job.
Beautiful.
Now, the thing I want to talk to you, but you had worked with her so closely on Blonde Ambition, and of course, her voice so well. Were you struck when she goes into EVITA how she literally changed her voice?
Was I surprised? No, I was not surprised because I know Madonna. I knew Madonna. And, this woman always went for what she wanted and not in a half-assed way, always 100%, like Michael, You can't be that famous and just kind of slough off at any point you want. If you want to be, you got to go for it. She took voice lessons. She took, I got her some tango teachers. She took tango lessons, Argentinian tango lessons in New York. She wanted this role so badly. And I thought she did a phenomenal job. And I was very upset with the Academy that, she wasn't nominated for an Academy Award. And, she really, truly should have been. And in my esteem, she should have won it because her performance was flawless. And all the people that boo-hooed her, poo-pooed her before she did it, I think many of them were pretty blown away at what she came out with, both her vocal range, how hard she worked, her dancing, her tango stuff was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, flawless. So no, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised that she sang like a diva because she is a diva, and this is something that she always wanted to be, was a movie star. And why not?
When I mentioned Fosse, you said that you weren't much of a Broadway person. And of course, later you would go to work on Broadway. How do you feel about Broadway now?
I don't really have much attachment to Broadway. I mean, I direct musicals, but I direct them predominantly in Europe. And I did one project in New York, Kiss of the Spider Woman. I did that originally for Hal Prince. Difficult job, but I don't visit New York much. So I don't see a lot of original things. I mean, I see them when they come out here. In fact, next Sunday on Easter, we're going to see Harry Potter. The week after, we're going to see Life of Pi. I directed EVITA, the musical in Europe. I directed the musical Cabaret in Berlin. That is now, this summer will be its 21st year, the longest running show in the history of Berlin.
Incredible.
And yeah, really cool. And I'm working on a project now that I'm very excited about that I think is going to actually, we've been working for about 7 years. I was pulled in unusually as a director from the very beginning of the project. Usually the director doesn't come in until the whole thing is totally complete. But the producer knew me and he asked me to come in early on. And I've been part of this through the writing of it and the compositions of it. And it's been really an exciting adventure. And it looks like next year we're going to begin international casting for it and may do a smaller version in Amsterdam and then move it to Germany.
Is it an original musical?
It is original, totally original. Yeah, I can't really talk about it, to be honest. So I'm not allowed.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it is. So I'm still doing a few things, I don't want to do a heck of a lot of things anymore. I'm kind of, I don't know, I've done
listen, you're just back from Holbox. You want to go back to Mexico. I get it.
Baby, that's the truth. I'll tell you that. I mean, get me on the next plane. Get me on the next plane.
The last thing I want to say, I know that, like I was saying, like you're a very strong, like visualizer. What a lot of people do, like either what is that? The people will do like vision boards, but you actually go old school. But you just use your refrigerator as a manifestation canvas, and on there you had Lars von Trier, who you did manifest working with on Dancer in the Dark, of course, the BJORK movie. Who else were you able to manifest based on this refrigerator?
Well, I had BJORK on there. I had Lars von Trier on there. I had Glenn Close on there, who I later did the Sound of South Pacific with in Australia for a TV movie. And that was weird. I mean, I had her from Dangerous Liaisons, a photo of her with her and Michelle Pfeiffer and John Malkovich. And it was just a picture of them, but I love her so much. I put her on there. I had Elvis on there, even though he'd been dead for years and years. And I wound up writing and directing Viva Elvis for Cirque du Soleil. I had already worked with Michael and Madonna. I'm trying to think who else could have been on there. The only person that's been on there that nothing ever happened with, I don't know if it ever will, was Gaga. She's been on there for a long time, and I did get one phone call from her one time, but I was in Europe working, and I couldn't do it. It was a project that I think she did maybe for the Grammys about David Bowie. It was a whole David Bowie set.
That she did. That was that was a few years ago.
A couple years ago,
which was amazing.
Yeah,
because she is the female Bowie.
She's amazing. But anyway, so far that has not manifested. But I again, like we talked about at the very beginning of our conversation, I feel that, or felt that, if I put these people's photos on the refrigerator, every time I pass by and I see them, it will put them into my mind, and that will send that energy out into that universe of creativity. And maybe when they're thinking of something, it'll kind of like a lottery little ball that you spin, it lands on the right number. They'll think about me. And in every case, except for Gaga, well, it did happen with Gaga in a way, but, materializing into something complete. everybody I put on there has worked. So yeah, that's a crazy, crazy thing. So
I mean, I so believe in, like, you gotta think it, you gotta dream it to achieve it.
Yeah, you have to, because if you can't see it, nobody else can see it, but you have to be prepared. It's not just enough to dream about it. You have to prepare yourself. So when the opportunity arises, you're ready. You can say, yeah, here I am. I'm ready to do it. Not like, oh, okay, give me 6 months to go and learn the tango, or whatever it might be. No, you got to be ready. If it's something that you want, then prep yourself. Give yourself the benefit of the doubt. If you believe you can see it, then see it, and then do it. Make it happen.
Express yourself, baby.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Vincent Paterson, your book, Icons and Instincts, it's available everywhere. It's available in different languages if you're in a different country. This has been so fun and interesting. I can't thank you, and I'm so glad we connected. I really hope this documentary you're talking about, of featuring your footage, something you should check out. There's a new Liza documentary that is largely based around this found footage that had never been released. So there may be something there. My friend produced it. It's now like available. It's in theaters. The Liza doc, but yeah, it's all largely based on this found footage that had never been seen before.
Wow.
So you should look at that Liza doc. That may be a little inspiration.
Great.
I think there's a big chance this can happen based on that.
Listen, I hope so. I hope that it's really it's a love Valentine message to Madonna is what it is, and we're making a 10-minute pitch reel, and I hope she falls in love with it and she sees that it's done with nothing but love and admiration, and that she gives us the okay to proceed. I think it would make so many people in the world very happy.
Well, we all want to relive that time. I mean, and look at her with the celebration tour. Like, I think it's going to be some green lights. I think it's going to be green lights for you.
Good. I hope so. From your lips to Madonna's ears.
Let's end it there. Thank you so much. This was so great.
Thank you. Thank you, Jess. I really, really appreciate it. You've been delightful to talk to. You're an intelligent, smart, wonderful, charming woman, and it's just been a delight. So thank you so much.
Thank you.